The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I am your host, Peter Martin, Vice President of Business Development for CREF. We are located in Boston, Massachusetts, home office in Boston, Massachusetts. We also have locations in Dallas, Texas, which is where my guest is in Texas. We have locations in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Salt Lake City, Utah. For more info on CREF, go to cref.com.
And I lost first time, and you were down in the dumps for quite a while. But at the end of the day, you say, you know what, this was a darn good experience. You had to learn how to, rehearse a Zoom speech with professionals. I'd never done that before. So I would encourage people, it's worth the effort, if nothing else, just to get over some of your own fears.
As always, thank you for tuning in, and I am happy and pleased to have as my guest today, Michael Hatton. Michael is Vice President of Facilities Engineering and Construction at Memorial Hermann in Houston, Texas. Michael is also the new president of ASHE President 2025. Mike, congratulations and welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be part of the podcast and appreciate you reaching out. And more importantly, I'm honored to be the president of ASHE for the year. So I have great shoes to fill. I think I'm maybe the 61st president, if I recall. So that's kind of an interesting legacy that I have to try my best to support and enhance. It's
funny. I don't know about you. Like you're in an engineering role, you're in a construction role. I was a history and journalism major in college, and to be doing what I'm doing, I guess, or even to have worked in project management, my mind is all kind of words, and it's not numbers. I'm not number oriented, and I always had a hard time. The sciences, math, I never liked them. Loved history. I could like English if it was reading, but I was not wired that way. What were you? Are you a numbers guy? Are you an engineering guy? What's kind of your background there?
My training is in engineering as an apprenticeship and power plants and things like that. I'm not a licensed engineer, but my background is more of a liberal arts background in a little teacher's college where parents said, you've got to get a degree. So I took about every class up there and bummed around for 5 or 6 years till I got a degree, and they kicked me out of school with an education. So that's actually how I made it to Texas. I needed a job. So yeah, I've kind of had a good mixture. It's been very beneficial to my career that I kind of absorbed a lot of everything and not too much of any one item. So it provides a different perspective than a purely technical background.
Where are you from, Mike? We said
West Virginia. I grew up in middle of nowhere in a family farm there in West Virginia. Went to a small state college there and then moved to Texas with one of those oil busts they had whenever that was, those recessions that come up every 5 or 6 years in that part of the world.
Well, let me just ask then, so a teacher and a liberal arts background, how did you end up doing what you do?
I went to move to Texas there, and Gerald Hines, the real estate developer, the big high-rise guys, they had open positions. And I took an entry-level position with them to learn about buildings. And we had a formal apprenticeship program back in the days through the Department of Labor and for a stationary engineer and building operations. And I actually learned buildings from the ground up and central plants and big electrical distribution and MEP systems and things like that. So those programs really don't even exist anymore with this new generation, but times were booming and Houston was growing, and it was a great education. And back in the days when the real estate developers also owned the properties, they spent dollars to do the assets right and to take care of those assets correctly. So it was a good way to learn how facilities ran and how to take care of them, and renovations and construction as well, to do it the right way.
Did you find that you had a natural aptitude towards that? Did you take to that pretty easily, or how was that process?
Oh, yes. Growing up on a farm, I've been working with my hands since I was a kid, learned to weld when I was about 10.
Okay.
Repairing old farm machinery. So, I've always had a natural aptitude for mechanical systems. Went to college mostly because it was a requirement for the family, and in hindsight is the best thing that ever happened. You've got to have creds, as you know, and these days, especially in healthcare, degrees matter and things like that. But I think the hands-on aspect of my background has probably been the biggest thing that has helped me in my career across the way.
Ask you a question about the degree, only because you brought it up. So prior to joining CREF, as a lot of people watching this know, I did recruiting for 11 years, Gosselin Martin Associates, transitioned to CREF. But, Mike, one of the conversations I used to have, and I actually still have even here at CREF, relative to the degree is, and I've done a couple of specials on the Healthcare Facilities Network and on our podcast, that the degree is important. But, for a person who's got 20, 25 years experience, because let's face it, when we were growing up, the degree wasn't mandatory. It is now. But to me, I worked with some clients who would automatically disqualify a director who might have 20 years of hands-on experience, 20, 25 years of experience, got the certifications, they have their CHFM, they've got their CHC, but they don't have the degree. But they've led people, they've led big hospitals, and because they didn't have the degree, automatically disqualified. Now, I could see it at the VP level, but I would always advocate to take these situations as one-offs and not eliminate a whole grouping of folks without the degree. What's your position on that?
I totally agree with you. It's very unfortunate. In fact, I've had problems in the past with a person could do the job, but because of a lack of a degree, that you couldn't pay them what you needed to keep them. So they've moved back then to the commercial real estate world, made more money, had, less stress. But healthcare, unfortunately, has in the past really valued degrees too much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have one when I started in as an apprenticeship program. So in hindsight, that really benefited me along the way. And then I had a boss one time politely kicked me in the butt and said, stop working on all those certifications and go get your MBA, and so I can double your salary and make sure we still keep promoting you. So, that was good advice, and it's still good advice today. But I think the tide is slowly turning backwards. I think the industry has realized, the world has realized that sometimes sorting resumes purely on a degree probably disqualifies a lot of otherwise excellent candidates, but it's hard to turn the tide of, how the norms have been, but it's difficult to do so I would still suggest any young person, and even some of our more seasoned managers, I say, get yourself in school. We'll even help you and get a degree. I don't care what degree it is, but get a 4-year degree. It's going to help you as you get older and grayer like the rest of us.
Right. No, I agree with you. And it was, in a consulting role, there's only so much I can push, right? The client we work for the client. So you give them your opinion respectfully, and then if they don't take it, you move on. But I think the only other thing on the degree, and I agree with you that I think the tide is slowly turning, but also with the lack of people, the lack of qualified folks in the field now, if somebody doesn't have their degree, but they have their experience, you're really going to say, I'm going to hire somebody who has a degree, but they haven't worked in healthcare. They might have a degree in finance and they've worked in manufacturing. I'm going to hire them over a director. It's crazy. I don't get that.
Yeah, I think you've really got to have some trade experience. And in fact, my own opinion that I think our industry is probably still focused too much on purely having a degree and being in the wrong business. I'm not one that says that you can teach anybody with a degree to do what others need to. I think you've got to have some industries like ours that take technical competency and know what's going on with the bricks and mortar and some of the behind the scenes items, because that is our job. More like the merchant marine engineers. I mean, their job is to know how that machinery works and takes care of those. And I wish we had more of those folks in the industry still, but that industry is greatly shrinking. I know my dad came from that industry, went through the academies, and that's a good group of people, but there's few and far between these days.
Yes. Yeah. We have some up here in New England, and we have Mass Maritime, which is close to us, and Maine Maritime, which is obviously to our north. But I would try, and I've actually had them on the Healthcare Facilities Network before, the folks who work at those academies, because you're right. If you can get those kids, because there's still kids coming out, or young adults coming out, it's perfect. But as you know, there's so much competition for them. And when they come out of those academies, there's other industries that are willing to pay more. And when you're coming out of college, you're looking,
Yep.
you're looking for the paycheck. That's what is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. They can't produce enough in the salaries,
Yeah.
but they're great candidates.
Same thing. We like to try to go out, and if we can grab some trade craftsmen that are tired of traveling project to project and bring them on board. But again, the lure of the paycheck, we don't pay the top of the market for those types of crafts. So I still think long term, that's one of the challenges that our industry needs to face. And we've talked about is how do we get more people with some trade skills in their background to keep in our business?
Actually, Mike, what is your, it's funny, what you said, you moved to Houston about 40 years ago. So you've just seen an incredible boom where you are. What's the competition for talent like, for trades level talent? How do you guys attract, keep, and compete against some of those companies that I'm sure can pay more than you guys?
It's really difficult, especially when you get the oil field service companies, the Schlumbergers, and those folks who the same skills that we need, mechanical, electrical, controls technicians, they can go out and pay those people twice what we do, and they get unlimited overtime. Yes, they may have to travel quite a bit, but when they're young, they don't have a problem with that. We sometimes can steal them back during a recession, but we lose a lot of people to those industries. There's so much competition for the people who can truly work with their hands and also have enough wherewithal and political acumen, to actually be able to talk with admin and talk with customers as well. So it's a challenge to keep those people and recruit them.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Years ago, we were doing a recruitment for the University of Rochester Medical Center, and it was an energy plant. And a gentleman who was working on one of the drills in the Gulf was interested. And I think you talked about situationally, he'd made a lot of money, but he had a young family. Obviously, there's some risk in that career out in the Gulf of Mexico. And so he made that transition into healthcare. And sometimes it's just that timing, right? Where the person is in their life. You got to get lucky.
Yes. And I like to have a file full of those resumes, and sometimes we can steal them back. I know last winter about this time, I talked to a person who had left us, had really good skills, and went up, I think his family in the Northeast. He was driving around Boston in a snow and ice storm. And I said, we'd love to have you back in Texas. His wife was from up there, but we were able to entice him back, and he's been with us. So fingers crossed. You can't hold grudges against people who are moving on to better themselves. And I think sometimes people do that. And I like to think maybe I can let them go away for a few years, and maybe we can pay them and give them a better role when they come back the second time. So.
Right. And this industry is so small. You tell people all the time, don't burn bridges, because everybody knows somebody. If you don't know them personally, you know somebody who knows somebody.
Right.
Yeah, you really can't burn that bridge. So, talking about that 24 years of experience at Memorial Hermann, what type of change, Mike, have you seen, not necessarily with the organization, but in healthcare in your last 20, 25 years?
When I first joined the industry, in fact, I worked for one of the top hospitals in the med center before that for 7 or 8 years. And that was when these big institutions were kind of morphing from a trade organization where they had internal carpenter shops and electrical shops and plumbing shops, and where they were starting to shrink and become more generalist. And every year it was cutting staff, doing more with less, insource versus outsource, and those types of tribulations that we had. And I know my first job at the acute care hospital was at one of those large Texas Medical Center institutions, really name brand, well funded back in the day. And, the goal was there. They had a big layoff. I think one of my first job was to try to shrink some positions over there. So that wasn't fun. But, a lot of those entrenched people, it was their own fault because they wouldn't do any change management. They always worked a single shift. They were out the door by 2:30, and, we've got customers. So it's seen a great challenge. And then today, I think we've probably, the cost cutting has probably gone much too deep, I think, as our industry would acknowledge. And you still know how do we start insourcing things again? I saw one nice post on LinkedIn the other day about a person that's doing some in-house testing and maintenance on some of their safety systems. And what a refreshing post. For the last 20 years, we've been outsourcing all those items, and maybe the tide has turned and we'll start trying to be smart about that versus paying 2 or 3 times what, the internal labor is on that stuff. But probably the shrinking of the staff, and probably the expansion of the span of control for the manager and directors is the biggest change.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to say. You're talking about the bringing insourcing rather than outsourcing with the deficit of employees and with so many responsibilities now that are kind of thrust upon from the manager level on up to your level. Sometimes the thought is good, but the reality works against you a little bit in that way. You'd love to, but you don't have the people to, or the time to, or the resources to.
Yeah, and I think that my own opinion is the industry if we don't watch, we're going to really spiral into a decline, because as you get less and less technical competence on your team and you're stretched further, they don't know that a roof has a finite life and you need some definitive maintenance on it, or that pump, if it's leaking, there's a problem, or if there's a chiller system, you got to get ahead of the maintenance on that, or boiler system. So I think out of probably ignorance on some things, other than even lack of funding, is we're letting the physical facilities in these buildings decline. And I see that as I go around the country in some of the other areas and realize that, like, I've got a couple of friends up in the Boston area, and I didn't realize how challenging the economy up there was in some of these smaller systems. And
Oh, yeah.
Houston, we're blessed that we're still well funded, and we've got a increasing population that still has a decent payer mix, I guess is the technical term.
Yeah.
But other parts of the country, I talked to some of my peers, and it's mostly doom and gloom. So we're going to further spiral into decline of taking care of our facilities, and just put a little stab of paint on something versus truly fixing that item, or planning 5 years down the road for that air handler that needs to be changed out, or that piece of electrical distribution that's going to have a catastrophic failure if we don't get the maintenance done on it.
Yeah, that's what worries me as you look out the window to Boston right behind, right behind me. But Boston doesn't worry me, but or it should, I guess, maybe. But anyway, what worries me is what you said. Like, we're just, and I'm not a mechanical person. I'm not a math person. I couldn't, I'm not an engineer. So, but we're bringing in folks who don't have that level of knowledge, and have fewer years of experience, and folks aren't there to mentor them. It's one thing to bring somebody, like if you can mentor somebody and
Yes.
grow them, and that works. But often you're just throwing somebody, and not you, but somebody gets thrown in and they're left to swim on their own, and you just can't be successful that way.
Yes, you've got to have some sort of a farm system if you wanted to use a sports analysis, and
Yep.
and we've got to. I think also we probably do not recognize those technical skills. In fact, I know we don't recognize and support the technical skills as much as we support someone who can memorize a chapter and verse of a code and argue about the finer points of some code issue. We spend so much time and money on that, and those are the folks that get the glory versus someone who knows how to change a mechanical seal on a pump, or how to, safely take down a piece of electrical distribution and troubleshoot a motor control center. Those behind the scenes, more introverted type technical folks don't get the glory. And also we haven't been paying them enough, which is why, they've been moving on to other industries.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the challenge so complex, right? You can't just solve for one thing. It's multiple things all at one time that are kind of creating this environment where, like you said, a lot of hospitals are struggling.
Yes.
I
see that every time, and every day in Becker's almost, there's 1 or 2 of them that are closing the doors, or huge financial struggles. So while we're overly busy and crazy busy here at Memorial Hermann in Houston, it's a good problem to have. So,
I know, again, if you go online, follow your LinkedIn, you see the expansion, you see the projects, you see everything you got going on. What is it like you're the VP there. You've got a lot going. What's it like with all these new initiatives and changes and really good problems to have? How do you manage it all? How do you do it all? It's like an arms race, right? Except it's a hospital.
No, it really is. You're in the competition with all the other talent in the Houston market, and the
Yeah.
Texas Medical Center, I think, is still the largest medical center in the world. And we're all striving to have the biggest and the best facilities and the most numbers of MRIs or other types of widgets there are out there. So it's quite a challenge. I think currently, I think I've got 440 or more active projects, probably
Wow.
$2.5 billion, I think, is current. And then, the ones that I've got on LinkedIn are really, those are the small ones. Those are fairly easy to do. They're not that complex, but then there's some of the internal renovations are probably some of the most problematic, trying to build out operating rooms when you've got other operating rooms adjacent to it that you have to work through in phase. So it's quite a challenge to watch this region evolve and talk to my peers, like up in some of my friends in the Pacific Northwest and even in the Great Lakes area about, they're struggling up there for nickels, and we're doing our best here just to try to keep our physicians and our patient care folks with basic needs. I think I read somewhere where Texas is growing 400,000 or 500,000 people each and every year. And Houston, I think, is one of the big 4 cities. I think we're the biggest, perhaps Dallas, Fort Worth, but I mean, just massive population growth in the suburbs. And I think currently we've got $300+ million expansions on the drawing board that we're working through now and helping with and leading and trying to get them the budget. Then we've got dozens of other active ones and even some giant ones with billion after them that we're still got in the, I would call that more the dream stage. But healthcare is big. Texas keeps growing, as does a lot of the Gulf Coast area here.
Do you still enjoy it?
Oh, yes, I love it. I've been doing it forever. My real love, though, is facilities. Construction kind of was an also ran. My first love is the buildings and taking care of those and making sure our facilities are ready for patient care. Quite proud of the fact that we're actually, I wouldn't say we're on top of the deferred maintenance curve, but we get a nice chunk of capital every year to use for infrastructure, whether it's roofs or elevators or generators or fuel systems or hardening a building against hurricane. Our CFO and our C-suite support that, and we get a nice chunk of dollars that we allocate out every year. So I think I'm most proud of the fact that we have very few, knock on wood, catastrophic failures. We stay ahead of the curve. Not that we don't have the normal everyday uh-ohs that you get in healthcare, but that's my first love. Construction was one of those fine prints on a job description and other duties as assigned. That's how I think I got that. And then I screwed up and did really good on a couple of projects, so I became in charge.
That's what I was going to say. The more you do and the more you do it well, the more you get. In fact, I was just noticing that is a heck of a set of plans behind you.
Oh, that's our Sugarland expansion. That's some half size that's just breaking ground. I think this week we just got the first of the shutdowns. That's about a $253 million expansion in the suburbs. I think that's the fastest growing county in the nation, Fort Bend. We can't keep up with the growth in that area. And we've got a really great CEO down there, Melisha Patel, is really supportive. I think this is the third expansion since 2006 on that. And I've been blessed to be part of all that since it was a field out in the middle of nowhere that we brought that thing up. So I think we've got currently there's 3 like that going. And I think I've got 3 or 4 more, probably similar size, that we'll be pushing out for the budget committee and the board to look at in the next year, probably.
Do you ever feel like, like there's a breaking point? Obviously, you've got the money, which helps. But do you ever feel like there's a breaking point with the amount of work and the new construction where you're like, oh man, I need a break, or you just keep rolling on through?
Well, I haven't won the lottery yet, and the stock market hasn't quite gotten there.
Right.
Now, I think the real challenge we're having here and probably some other hot markets are getting enough competent subcontractors and the trade folks that truly know how to work in healthcare and deliver the projects.
Yeah.
I mean, building a standalone building by itself or a shopping mall is not that difficult. I don't want to discount it, but when you put a large addition on an existing hospital and you're marrying up operating rooms to other operating rooms and you're, having utility shutdowns, that takes a very competent facility staff and an even more competent group of subcontractors and contractors to scope that work and phase it. The phasing of these projects is so expensive and so important. So we don't have an and cause a big impact to patient care.
Well, it's funny you said that. So prior to like jumping into recruiting, I was doing project management in a hospital. And when you said like competent subcontractors, obviously my system had a lot of older buildings. It's Boston, much older, much older than you guys. And I was just thinking some of our projects, even just starting at the demo, you get a demo sub who breaks containment with asbestos and, three steps outside that containment. The ramifications, it just snowballs and everything comes into play. And you're right. And you got to have somebody who's worked in a hospital, right? It's just a different animal.
Yes, it really is. And we're very loyal to the contractors and subcontractors and trade crafts, but it's probably more so loyal from a technical competence point of view. It's not that we don't try new people, but I don't want to be the first person to give a brand new electrician a job when we're adding an isolation panel in an operating room. It's not that we don't like you or have anything against you, but even if I have to pay a few more nickels, I think I'd rather get someone who has a higher probability of success, because stuff happens. I mean, someone takes a sprinkler head out with a ladder, or like you say, they break a containment, or the demo contractors are the most challenging. They get their sawzalls in. So.
Hey, that's a dream job for every young kid, right? You just go in and you destroy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the corporate headquarters on the wall behind me. That used to be the old Transco Tower back in the glory days with Gerald Hines. And those buildings are easy compared to healthcare. I mean, they start up at 7 a.m. They shut down at 6 p.m. Even though they're a fabulous asset and you've got a world-class tenant in there, it's still very easy to do your job, to take care of scheduled maintenance, to do large renovations, because everybody's gone, on 6 o'clock in the evening. Energy management here.
Did you have that planned?
Yeah, must have. That's my energy management plug.
You said everybody's gone and your lights dimmed.
Yep. And we're in an office building here. We're a tenant in this office building here at corporate headquarters. But yeah, there's such a difference, as anybody in our industry knows, that between renovating or working, and like in a mother baby unit, there's never a good time to work in a mother baby unit. And you can't do a lot of heavy maintenance or demolition work at night because we got patients that are sleeping. So it's challenging to do these jobs, as you know from your experience.
Yeah. And then, you got to keep those HCAP scores up, because if they're not, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So we've spent a lot of time on your day job. Let's transition to your new role. How does it feel? Are you excited? How's it started off? You've been in office 1 week.
Well, so far, I don't think I've been impeached yet, so I must be doing good. No, I think it's a fabulous opportunity, and following folks like Skanda is really nifty. It's an honor to be chosen as the leader of ASHE. It's kind of daunting. I've got a list of probably 15 or 20 items I'd love to do, but who knows what I'll really accomplish in a year. But I think the biggest thing I can see is that perhaps ego-driven, but I really would like to give back to ASHE if I can. And let's get that next generation involved and make sure we're relevant, because ASHE has provided so many opportunities to me with speaking opportunities and getting over the fear of crowds and just networking and finding contacts and expertise. I've, over the years run into expertise at our various conferences that really are the world-renowned gurus in their sector that you just happen to need for this. So it'd be fun to just improve the organization even more. And we've got to grow, I think, as well, especially as my generation grays out, like we talked earlier, is how do we get those 30-somes involved that have got families and that their CFO doesn't have the dollars to send them to these meetings. So how do we get them involved? And and it's probably just you and I, but I still think, as you did as well, that we've got to have some face-to-face and handshaking, and it can't all be done on an iPad or our cell phones.
And it's funny. So obviously we're in an office in Boston, and like most organizations post COVID, there are folks who work from home, and that's fine. That's kind of the new reality, right? But I think what you lose, and you tell me, is you kind of lose that informal mentoring that happens. You lose, somebody observing how you operate, what you do, how you say the stuff that just through osmosis teaches you how to be a professional. You schedule a Zoom meeting to schedule something that really, if everybody's there, you can probably solve in 15 minutes face to face over passing a paper. So it is that face to face. You seem like me. I'm sure we're the same. I love just seeing people, talking to them, connecting with them. And I think to an extent that's lost. How do you get that back, Mike? What do you do?
I don't know, but I think again, I think we've all seen the inefficiencies in that enough that we're trying to do more hands-on and get out in the open. And I think one of the even bigger problems with Zoom or Teams is those 3 or 4 hour meetings that really don't work at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like everything else. After about 30 minutes, people are multitasking. So using Zoom as we can, I think we really have to have a focused agenda if we're going to try to get through some things. And some things don't belong on remote. In my mind, you've got to have that mentoring and really even just behavioral items and know how to interact with one another and share these difficult concepts. We have learned on the betterment of the technology. We've learned to design buildings, and I can go on Zoom and take my pen or highlighter and circle items on a blueprint when you got an architect or an engineer drawing something. So it really has helped us talk, remotely. We've got an architectural firm that we work in several areas of Texas and one up in the Boston area. So we got one of our designers is up in the Colorado area, and she's learned, she's of that generation that can do all that stuff remotely and still has the right bubbly personality to get to customers, attention and professionalism. And the big Sugarland project, our project architect is in Chicago, and she does a great job. So I think we can still spread our responsibilities and get resources from further areas, but things like wires and pipes and hands-on maintenance and facility operations, unlike perhaps an accounting person, ours is always going to be hands-on. But I've had to learn with the 30-somes that we have. I think we'd call those the millennial generation, that they've got a whole lot better attitude on work-life balance than perhaps I do. And you've got to learn to be flexible with them and make sure they got time off. They'll log on late at night and do all their work, but they got stuff to do at 3 o'clock with the family. So I think we've all learned to let that evolve. And I think that's a good thing, but we've got to limit those 4-hour Zoom meetings for sure.
Right. So you mentioned, 4-hour meetings. Those are tough. So you mentioned, you mentioned 10 priorities, 10 to 15 priorities. What are some of your priorities for this year as ASHE president?
I've really been pushing growth of the organization. We really got to work on membership. I've mentioned several times, in my own opinion, I think we do a terrible job, like you said, of getting out to the individual chapters and flying the ASHE flag, having a table there, having someone there. And perhaps there's a way we could work with the chapters, and when they're signing up for a membership, whether it be North Carolina or a New England chapter, that we also get their ASHE renewal or get ASHE membership so we can share those databases and really keep growing. It's a premier organization, but I think where somewhat our own success has perhaps caused us to be a little set in our ways. And I think this next generation wants to get their information in a different format. So I think we've really got to work through that. So growth is my number one item. And again, we spend so much money on arguing and debating and addressing the little nuances of some code that may or may not have any impact on fire safety or patient care safety, or that helps the bottom line. And we spend so much time and effort on that. My own opinion, I think ASHE really should focus some of our advocacy efforts on getting rid of some of those regulations. I mean, if it does not improve patient safety or patient care or directly help the bottom line, I don't know why we're doing it. We've got a lot of those in our industry. We've always done it this way. And you have to do this because, the code says, or whatever the agency is, your quality agency, the agency says you shall do this. And we need to ask why more.
Yeah.
And I think we reward a lot of those people who make a good living arguing about those codes and standards. And we really need to focus on things that are bottom line. I mean, there should be a two-tier test. Does it help quality? Does it help the bottom line of an organization? And if the answer is no, we should really be getting rid of that or finding a way to sunset some of those regulations.
Interesting perspective. That why is really a powerful question, right? Why?
Yes.
Yeah. I going back to that, the resume question, that was one of my pushbacks against organizations, not resume, the degree. When doing the recruiting, I said, well, why do you need the degree? Well, because. Yeah. Well, it's not a reason. I mean, but why? In an academic medical center, if you say, okay, you're dealing with PhDs, people with MBAs sitting around saying, I can almost buy it in the academic environment, right? It is a little bit different, but if the answer was because, and a lot of times, well, it's the way we've always done it. You just need it.
Yep. Poking fun at my own organization, I think 2 years ago, and again, disclaimer here, Hatton's opinion from Memorial Hermann, just working through our own recruitment and folks like that. We had a intern, a degreed engineer, worked for us as an intern for 2 summers. And she was fabulous and wanted to come to work for us. But again, trying to get her brought on, the only position we had needed 2 years of experience. I said, wait a minute, she's just out of college. She's had 2 internships. Well, luckily she had some family experience. Her father was in the contracting business and she did help on that. So we were able to stretch that and get our HR folks to sign on. But, you lose a good candidate because the requirements and the computer database says no, that this resume doesn't match, where you've got a good person who's got a fabulous potential, and you can't pay them what they're worth. You can't even bring them on because in order for an entry-level job, you have to have experience, which is totally counterintuitive. And that's your business. You see it every day.
Right. And that's where I think, increasing reliance on AI and the machines to weed different candidates out and what do they have on the resume. And now people, heck, they're outsourcing their resume. People are putting keywords on there, even if they don't have the experience. Right. That's a long way to say. That's why it's a person like you who knows the people, who knows what they're like, who knows their capacity to say, hey, this is a person we want to bring into our field because we're lacking and they're good and we can grow them. And people, maybe another angle for you at ASHE. I mean, ASHE talks about that a lot, like the hiring and refilling the pipeline. And we talk about that a lot too. Part of that is getting HR to loosen up a little bit and work with you and people like you to say, okay, they may not be exactly what we're looking for, but they've got what we need and they can be a valuable member.
Yeah, I think the tide is turning and people are realizing how dangerous those database searches are and the AI that you're using. So I know my HR person called the other day. She was wanting to do a crosswalk about our positions and what other positions would work in our field. Like even for a project manager, someone with an accounting background does great in project management. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be an architect or a contractor. So we had a crosswalk of several other types of trades. So as they get resumes in, so I think the industry, or I guess that's the whole human resources environment and the people who build those databases are starting to realize that they're excluding some very good candidates because of these keywords, like you say.
Yeah.
That it's further exasperating a problem we all have.
Exactly.
Of finding those.
Yeah, I would always say, listen, if it was 10 years ago or what, if you had tons of people out there and you could be selective, then I still wouldn't agree with it, but at least you could get some.
Yeah.
You don't have that. You don't have that. So how do you, you've got 1 year as president. It's funny. As I told you, I was talking to Skanda this morning and it was just about a year ago. I was talking to him as he started on his journey. And it seems like yesterday, if it seems like yesterday for me, I'm sure for Scan it was like that. How do you accomplish in a year? And you can only do a year because you got a daytime job, you got billions of dollars put in place. But how do you accomplish your goals in a year? Is it difficult?
I think it's probably going to be extremely difficult because I have a whole list of things to do. I've got to work with Lizzie and Chad and Skanda and Dennis, and let's come up with maybe 3 or 4 things that we can accomplish. I would like to save the world, but on the same token, let's focus on 3 or 4 items that we can work on. And I think number 1 is getting our strategic plan finished up and push that out. One thing I know that we do have some good momentum on, and I'm hoping to personally help push, is over with the Louisiana chapter and ASHE. They partnered together with I think that's the North Shore Technical Community College. They've got a entry-level orientation for facility people to take, kids that are right out of high school or looking for a career, and at least indoctrinate them over, 16 or 18 weeks to show what we can do and open up some, it's not really an apprenticeship program, but open up some entry-level positions. So I've been preaching for years that we've got to get that level of the ASHE pipeline populated, because we all came from entry level one point in our career and we've made it to where we are. So ASHE does a great job, on the top end, and now with their core competencies, I think they're starting to work on some of the others as well. But we've got to refill that pipeline. So as my generation moves out of the business, that we've got that next group ready to go.
What are some other goals that you have for the year, Mike?
I think the biggest thing was growth and getting that next generation. I'd like to focus on, my opinion is, to get ASHE back out to the people like we've talked about. Not everybody can go to the conference. We hear a lot of concerns about, my CFO won't give me the $2,500 it takes to get to, the healthcare technology conference, which is well worth it, but dollars are what dollars are. I think ASHE's got a good program they've had the last couple of years where they do the regional events. Sometimes I think they've got that pretty regular in Indianapolis. I sent one of my junior managers up there last year, but again, we spent, it's $2,500, $3,000 for a week up there. They have fabulous content, but why can't we as ASHE move that same curriculum out to wherever we have large conclaves of healthcare organizations? I think, there's all the cities. Boston has them. You get up into Rochester, Minnesota area, Chicago, Houston, large medical center, the Phoenix area. In my mind, how do we push that out to those regions so that the junior members of the facility teams who want to participate in that, we can have them go drive for a couple hours to get there and stay overnight, or maybe make it a day trip there if it's in their city. So I don't think we do a good job of pushing ASHE out to the people versus having the people come into ASHE for these conferences. And it's getting further magnified as the bottom lines are tightening up. It's probably been a trend for 5 or 6 years, and COVID has further awakened us of the problems. So I would really love to do that. ASHE has got some great content. They've got some great education. It can't all be delivered on internet. I know a lot of that is going on demand, but I still think a lot of that we need to, the networking piece of that is so important to teach, and the sharing of resumes and just a contact and finding those experts, that we really got to get that education out. So
I agree that, just 2 plugs, and hopefully with the conference being in Columbus this year, I know for whatever reason, California, it's just hard to get people to, right? I'm on the East Coast. I know it's difficult, but Columbus is relatively central. I know it's not the exact central part of our country, but it's hopefully well attended this year.
Yep. And Indianapolis, I know, was a good airport to get in and out of, and Nashville works, but Columbus should be fun to do. So I think that's the first time I can recall really being in the Midwest. So it'd be kind of exciting to try something different. That should attract a whole good group of people from the Great Lakes area and some of those areas there.
And I am going to put in a plug, because I just heard today, me and Jeff O'Neill submitted a proposal. So we got accepted. So Jeff, if you're listening, from RWJ Barnabas Health in New Jersey, the vice president in that organization, we're going to be doing what we call the Facility Professionals Toolbox. And it's kind of a look at some of the, this, right? you're always optimizing your boilers, you're optimizing your building, your generators, all the technical stuff, but nobody in this field ever optimizes their career or kinds of thinks about their career. You're just going, going, going. So it's the last thing. So come see Jeff and myself. It's the facility professionals toolbox, give you tips and tools for your career, but we just got accepted. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to Columbus. It's always a great event, right, Mike? I mean, it's kind of like in some ways it's like a reunion because you see people maybe for once a year, but it's, you were talking about face to face. You just pick up a lot informally that you wouldn't over Zoom.
Yeah. And, I think that's actually another one of my goals as well. And I don't know where it ranks on the list. And I've talked to Lizzie about it several times. And I think we all agree we need to, is ASHE does a great job of growing those directors. But how do we get someone to the C-suite? Teach them those soft skills, the political skills, how do you do these types of Zoom, these podcasts, the crisis management type education. So I think you've hit on a very key topic that as my generation moves on, how do we take that person who starts out? I think Dale way back when talked about from the boiler room to the boardroom.
He did, yeah.
We don't do a good job of taking that senior director and getting them ready as a chief facility services officer. And there's a lot of role for that. So I really think we could take our SASHEs and find them and have a separate almost curriculum and a career path. And over a couple of years that we could get them the exposure they need and get them those skills that they're going to need to thrive in the boardroom and to be able to really give those senior executive presentations. So I think that would be such a compliment to our business. And I think we're going to wake up one day real soon and find out all those senior leaders have moved on. And that's going to be just as much of a crisis as it is for the technical people who know how to run a fluke meter or know how to, performance test a chiller.
Right, right. What do you think is the, it's always an interesting question. What do you think with all the changes that have happened at the director level? So let's just take the director level. What do you think the ideal mix of skills is between like the technical stuff? And then let's just talk what you and I were just talking. Let's call that the soft skills. What mix do you think you need to be effective at the director level between technical and soft?
My most successful directors have a very good balance of each. They're probably a little more weighted on the technical side, but they've also got enough political acumen to be able to interact with the CEO and the CFO. And we would normally shy away from those conversations, but they've got to be right there at the table.
Yeah.
And I really like the folks who've got enough technical knowledge that can truly help sell. We talk about capital asset renewal. ASHE's talked about it for 20 years, and our industry still hasn't done a very good job of managing it. I've got to have someone who is polite enough, but forceful enough to badger the CFO to make sure you've got an ear at the budget table.
Yeah.
And get the dollars to address that stuff before it becomes catastrophic. And you've got to have a good technical background, but you've also got to have the soft skills to be able to weave through the politics of knowing there are other priorities and know how to sell your case and support the business case for that. So I think we've got to have a mix. I have not had a lot of success in the years who are purely, or for directors who are purely administrative or paperwork people. And maybe that's because I came from a background that was a lot of hands-on myself, but I think we've been successful. You've got people who know the difference in the field, and a lot of them have had licenses in the past, may still have trade licenses and things like that. But how do we take those that may be somewhat of a rough diamond like I was, or I probably still am today, and polish those up to that senior C-suite level that can be that large system chief facility officer, or those large academic medical centers where you're fighting with the PhDs for the funding, and you've got to get the bricks and mortar needs just as much as their research grants does.
It really is an interesting career path, isn't it? I mean, because if somebody was just listening to what you said for the last minute, you touch every part of that facility, right? From the bricks and mortars to the C-suite. Your fingerprints are on everything. And you've got to at least be skilled to be able to operate in all those different areas.
Yes, and I think our best directors these days, I've got like all organizations, we have some that have got more tenure than others, and some have different likes and dislikes. And a big part of my job is knowing, what those are. Is the ones that I really like are the folks that actually like a seat at the table on these big giant construction projects and can help you get those alligators out of the way early, the stuff that we know we've got to address at the same time, and be polite and forceful, but also get the deferred items that they know has got to be fixed as part of that operating room expansion, and state their case and politely push it and work through that. So it's a good mix of technical skills and enough soft skills to be able to state your case and not offend too many people in the boiler room.
Right. Well, so I'm talking to Michael Hatton, in addition to the new president for ASHE for the year 2025. He doubles as a VP of Facilities Engineering and Construction for the Memorial Hermann Health System in Houston. Did you, two final questions, if that's okay. I don't want to hold you much longer. Number one, your path to ASHE presidency, how did it happen? How did it evolve? Like, I'm sure when you came into healthcare, you probably didn't know about ASHE. How did that evolve? And was it a goal for yours, a long-term goal? Or tell us a little bit about that.
I guess it was 25 years ago now. This year was probably my first exposure to ASHE. Leo Gehrig actually brought me in under his wing. When I first took this job about 3 months later in the Texas Medical Center, Tropical Storm Allison destroyed my hospital. We had 2.5 levels of water in the basement, I think 40 some million gallons, and
wow,
totally destroyed a 3 million square foot facility that I was now the boss of. So
wow,
we spent all summer getting that back into shape and got it back opened, I think in 28 or 29 days. And I think we spent $400 million. And I learned a whole lot about people management and project management and priorities and stress management, all that other good stuff. Yeah. And then I know as part of that, we put in an application to ASHE for their Vista Award. I knew nothing about ASHE, and we happened to be selected. So then Leo took me under his wing and gave me a couple task force assignments, and I learned a little bit about ASHE, and I found out this is a good group of people and had some good mentors there. So at the annual conferences back in the day, there's such a variety of topics that, you can sit in whichever classroom is maybe in your best item, whether it's a technical item or some of the soft skills or even some of the Sunday sessions as well. And then I know I've worked in close proximity to several past ASHE presidents, the Mark Kennedys of the world, who twist your arm and know how to make you volunteer for stuff. Yeah. And Terry Scott and I have worked together off and on, and Tony and some of the people. So yeah, they pushed me. You really need to put your name in the hat and give back. So a couple of years ago, I decided to do that. And Skanda beat me the first year because he's a master politician. I didn't realize how much work it was to run for a national office with all the handshaking and contact building. It was a fun experience, and probably it would be very good to do early in your career to learn those skills.
Yeah. What's the time? So the voting starts, well, now it starts at the annual, like during the conference, and then it's announced in late August. What's that time like while you're waiting? Do you just put it out of your mind, or what's that wait like? Because
that's probably the most, I think I can survive a tropical storm that destroys my hospital and have to rebuild it in a month for $300 or $400 million. That's a lot easier than spending a month and a half trying to be a politician and kissing babies and shaking hands and the stress of that. And the real problem with that is someone has to lose. That's the problem with all elections and sporting events. You got 3 or 4 good candidates and someone has to win, and I lost first time and you're down in the dumps for quite a while. But at the end of the day, you say, you know what, this was a darn good experience. You had to learn how to, rehearse a Zoom speech with professionals. I'd never done that before. So I would encourage people, it's worth the effort, if nothing else, just to get over some of your own fears of public speaking and networking and some of those items.
Well, you're putting yourself out there. It's funny you say it. So this was the first. So last year I interviewed Skanda when he started as president, and then 2 years ago I talked to Jeff Henney when he was running, and Jeff and I had a relationship, and so I just talked to Jeff. And then this year in the election, I was like, well, why don't I talk to all three candidates and let them kind of, put the platform. So I talked to Dennis, talked to Allison, talked to Danielle. They were all great. And I'll be honest, I didn't vote for any of them because I liked, I liked them all. And in a way, I was like, I can't vote for one of them. And so, my perspective was interesting. And then when, Dennis won, I was like, I felt bad for Allison and Danielle, but certainly Dennis is a great choice too. So you're right. There's lots of good people who put themselves out there, and you're not doing it for personal gain. You're doing it for the good of the industry that served you well.
Yeah, it's a real risk, you find out, and having lost the first time, you put yourself at a lot of risk, and you build your ego up, and
Yeah.
you find out that there are winners and losers. I thought your podcast was great. I watched all three of them, and each of the three candidates had different styles.
They did.
I thought they each did a fabulous job, and
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody learned from that on the end. I know I learned so much more when I was just having to video some of the items for the campaign speeches a year earlier. That's the most stressful part, to not look like a dork when you're on Zoom.
Well, and that, like, when you're at the conference and you guys have to go up there, the timing kind of stinks because it's Monday afternoon. Yeah. People are coming off a lunch, and then the three candidates just come up on stage, 1, 2, 3, and you got what, 2 minutes or whatever it is. And
yeah, and then Scanda sachets out there like he's a politician that's been doing it for 50 years and natural speaker. So no, I think it's a good group of people. And I think that's what I want to make sure that if anything is, when I'm done with the organization and they decide that my time is over, that how do we get that next pool of leaders that are ready to do? We've got to improve the volunteer base to give more people an opportunity. And I know several people on the advisory board have mentioned, even Lizzie herself, because the large chapters often dominate the voting block, whether it's New England or North Carolina or even the Texas group, and then, Region 6 where Danielle is. There's a lot of really good, competent people that are in some of the smaller chapters that probably will never get a chance to serve at a national level. So how do Scanda, Dennis, Lizzie, Chad, how do we drag those people to the table and give them that same opportunity or push that Leo would have given me, 25 years ago or more now, to get us to the table? Because I was that same scared kid way back when, having to give a public speech in front of 3,000 or 4,000 people on Mondays at ASHE.
And they're all looking at you.
That's the most
for what
fearful.
You're going to say.
Yeah, the most fearful things in the world.
That's great. So, last question, Michael Hatton. Just as you look out 5 years, and your goals are so forward facing, which is great because, as we said, I think we've lost a little bit of that human touch. But as you look out 5 years in healthcare facilities management in general, what do you see?
I think there's still going to be some doom and gloom, I'd hate to say, because looking at Becker's every day and knowing the healthcare environment, the consolidations are going to continue. I think some of the smaller facilities are going to continue to struggle, which means there's going to be a lot of healthcare turnover at the director level. I think we're probably going to further dilute my profession to make those people do even more support services, which means that we'll probably have less focus on the mission that I'm near and dear with, and that's taking care of buildings and supporting the patient care. I would hope, or maybe it's a dream or a quest, that in the next 5 or 10 years, we can tame some of the regulations. Again, this is my personal opinion, not ASHE's, not Memorial Hermann, but let's get rid of some of those silly, arcane, check the box code issues that the regulators all grade us on every couple of years. I would hope that we could have some sense in the world, or financially say we can't afford to do this. It makes no sense. It doesn't improve safety. So let's get rid of some of those regulations, get rid of some of those mundane tasks that we bring up on. I really see a bright future. We've just got to get ahead of the curve on growth. We've got to have a very good balance between business partners and facility professionals as well. I know as I traveled when I was campaigning, I hit 3 or 4 or 5 states, and I noticed some chapters were maybe 90% business partners and 10% facility people. and others had a really good balance of maybe 50-50. And I think we've got to watch that we don't get the balance out that, it becomes just a giant marketing event. So I think having a healthy balance with the organization is still important.
Yeah, it really is, because, obviously you need the funding that the business partners bring.
Yes.
But the business partners want the access to the directors. You're right. It's kind of like a dance. They each need each other. And if one's out of balance, there's issues.
Yeah. And, the business partners, I've met so many that have been so important, and they're usually the soft marketing type. The more technical ones is who I gravitated to. Some of the folks who really invented some of the technology, some of the data mining and things like that. And basically, they probably do they probably soft sell themselves versus the pushy types. And everybody has their own opinion of that. But I think a lot of people in my seat are probably looking for more technical help at these conferences and answers, and not just pure marketing. So, but I think I think in the next 5 to 10 years, of course, my goal, as mentioned several times, the scandal repeated as well. And Dennis, I want to get us to 20,000 members. I think today we're about 12,000, 13,000 members. I think we can be there. We've got to get out and visit the chapters. We've got to fly the ASHE flag. We've got to find an easy way for state and local chapter members to also become ASHE members. And then more importantly, I'd like to see some fresh faces on task forces and committees in the next 5 to 10 years, so we can capture those people from those areas that may be a smaller region or a smaller chapter that may not get the first dibs on the rise of leadership.
Well, Mike Hatton, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a great conversation. Good luck in your role as VP, and good luck in your role as ASHE President.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to reach out. I think these podcasts are fabulous. So, Pete, I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Mike. I'll see you in Columbus.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Everybody, thank you, as always, for watching the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm Peter Martin from CREF. We'll see you again in the future. Thanks for watching.